It's not always a punishment when God removes a player from the game. It may be a protective order for you at times. There's an odd quiet in the background right now, and this is a divine pause, not peace. Signs are popping up all around you, even if you didn't notice them at first. Unexpected losses, quiet departures, strained relationships, and those who once made fun of you are now witnessing your life turn into a model. Let's be practical. They weren't prepared for a tale in which you lost unexpectedly and you won without cunning. And this is the reality they were unaware of. God does not use a timer when placing people on a timeline. He uses a mirror for this. One thing becomes evidently painful as they lose everything. You were never the issue. The prophecy was you. According to psychological research, people who secretly harbor envy for others tend to cover it up with jokes or apathy. Indeed, the phony smiles they give you when you're shining. Shadow that has been validated by science. They're not just watching you win now, either. They have to see themselves lose each time you get up. It's not even personal, either. It's divine. They have halted their timelines. Their good fortune has frozen. Their vitality has disintegrated. Why? Because now, in front of everyone, the person they made a snap judgment on is wearing the crown. So fasten your seatbelt. It's more than just a message. It is an autopsy of the soul. You'll see the 14 brutal, profound, and remarkable reasons why they're destined for a divine timeout as your victory is broadcast from heaven. They didn't want you to know, so let's find out. First, they were not destroyed by God. In order to release you from their shadow, He froze them in time. They weren't wiped out. They froze. They were locked in time spiritually as your life progressed. They weren't prepared for this. They believed that by ignoring you, making fun of you, or leaving, they could ruin you. However, it was they who became stuck instead, and not in a dramatic fashion, but rather in a state of slow motion and quiet stagnation. The kind that leaves you feeling as though nothing is working. Similar to that, every door they attempt to open either slams or leads to nothing. Here, the person they believe to be buried is triumphant. God did not punish them by dragging them down. He suspended their access, not to punish them, but to protect you. Because if they had stayed, they would have ruined this blessing. Their pride, their secret jealousy, their controlling spirit would have tainted your harvest. That's why God only lifted you up. He froze them. He didn't destroy them. He just set them aside. While you were living hell and becoming the person you were born to be, they were stuck in the same old cycle, repeating the same false performances with no power behind them, silent in spirit. They thought they were moving forward, but in reality, nothing was moving forward. They remained in the same job, the same mindset, the same broken relationships, the same repetitive dramas. They didn't grow, they didn't develop, they just distracted themselves. Because that's how divine time passes. It doesn't always come with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it's a subtle stillness that seeps into every aspect of their lives. And the craziest part is that most of them still don't realize they're in it. But here's the thing. They watched you fall and thought it was the end. They didn't know that during your hardest times, you were growing spiritually, healing, praying, rising. You weren't stuck, you were going through a process. But they were stuck. It looked like freedom, but it was actually delay. Now your name is rising. Your light is undeniable. And they're sitting there, realizing that the person they once looked down on has moved beyond the life they once controlled. This isn't revenge. This is God saying, you can't hold them back and reap the rewards of their victory. They didn't go anywhere. They are simply frozen in a time when you no longer belong there. Second, they are not just losing something. They are losing access to you forever. They are not just losing their jobs, their friends, their money, or their opportunities. They are losing you, and that is something they cannot replace. At first, they thought it didn't matter. When they cut you out of their lives, treated you with disrespect, or played games, they thought they could always come back when things calmed down. You know, fake, I miss you, or acting like nothing ever happened. But what they didn't anticipate was God permanently cutting off their access to you. See, when someone treats someone chosen badly, they don't just lose a connection, they lose their protection. You weren't just a good friend, a supportive sibling, a loving partner, or a loyal presence in their lives. You were their spiritual protector. Your prayers protected them. Your presence elevated their energy. Your blessing opened doors they never knew existed. And now that protection is gone, they are exposed. When they left you behind, when they switched sides, they thought they had won. When they laughed at your pain, when they talked behind your back. They thought your silence was weakness, but in reality, your silence was harmony. You stepped aside so that God could intervene and take care of what he had protected with your grace. Now they are losing access to what they did not value. Not because you suffered, not because you harbored resentment, but because you surpassed their level of consciousness. You no longer react to betrayal. You no longer connect with dysfunction. And most importantly, you are not returning to the vomit. The old you, the one they thought they could reach, is gone. And this is hitting them in waves, not all at once, but through small, undeniable signs. Unanswered phone calls, events they are no longer invited to, blessings that pass them by, mysteriously closing opportunities. Everything is very subtle until it becomes clear, until they realize that the kindness they once experienced around you was not a coincidence. Those kindnesses came from their closeness to God's chosen ones. Now they are in spiritual exile. This is not a punishment. It is a divine separation. A line has been drawn. They can no longer hurt you or take advantage of you. They can no longer sabotage your heart and feed off your light. The access they have lost was the best thing they had, and it was the last time they could touch it. Third, their losses. They reflect the attacks they made against you. Everything they have lost right now is connected to what they tried to take from you. This is the part they will never admit out loud, but they feel it deep down. Life is reflecting their own intentions back to them, and this is very frightening. They are now falling into the traps they set for you. The lies they told about you are now coming out of their own mouths. The doors they tried to shut in your face are slamming in theirs. This isn't just bad luck. Spiritual justice is doing what it does best, exposing hidden hands. They thought what they did to you would remain secret. Jealousy, sabotage, smear campaigns, fake support that turned into outright betrayal. They thought no one saw, but the sky records everything. And now, the energy they put out is coming back to them. Not because you wanted to harm them, not because you sought revenge, but because divine laws always restore balance. When you were attacked, they found it amusing. They took pleasure in seeing you fall. They used your pain to connect with others. Some smiled at you while pretending to support you, knowing full well they were against you. And the craziest part is that they didn't feel threatened by what you had. They felt threatened by who you are, your resilience, your uniqueness, your ability to keep getting back up. Now they watch everything fall apart and don't understand why. The doors that once opened easily are now stuck shut. Connections are cooling. People are doing the same thing that once made them your enemies, distancing themselves from you. This is no coincidence. It is a pattern. They are taking back what they gave. They were crushed, shaken, and crushed again. They weren't prepared for the consequences because they never believed that what they did to you mattered. You were supposed to accept it, stay silent, and disappear. But instead, you healed. You rose up. You continued to move forward without seeking revenge. And that alone reversed the flow. Their losses are not random. They are a spiritual echo, a direct reflection of every weapon they wielded that failed to reach its target but returned to the sender. Not by your hand, but by divine command. Fourth, God did not punish them. He allowed them to live without your grace. They thought they were strong, confident, and untouchable. But in reality, they had been standing in your light all this time, mistaking it for their own brilliance. That is why they walked around filled with pride, entitlement, and superiority, because they were unknowingly benefiting from the grace in your life. You prayed for them. You silently protected them. You brought peace to chaotic environments. And yet they dared to mock the very oil that prevented their homes from being destroyed. God did not punish them or curse them. He simply removed you. And the moment he did, everything began to wither away. Not dramatically, but slowly, gradually, subtly. Relationships began to feel strained. The winds died down. They couldn't understand why their energy was depleted, why their plans kept falling through, why people weren't drawn to them as they once were. Because the source wasn't them. They were living on the spiritual credit of your presence. And that credit ran out. This isn't a punishment. This is what happens when people misuse kindness. They thought they were the reason the atmosphere in the room had changed, not realizing that your spirit was holding the entire atmosphere together. They thought your softness meant weakness, your kindness meant submission, and your loyalty meant worthlessness. But what they actually had was access to divine protection through you. And now that's gone. And what they're feeling isn't karma. The emptiness that comes with the departure of grace. People forget the weight of grace. Grace holds everything together. It keeps judgment at bay. It covers what needs to be covered. And when they dishonored you, they lost the protection they didn't even know they had. God didn't need to do anything dramatic. He simply withdrew with you. And when he did, everything they had built on false security began to unravel. Now they were in a barren place, not because they were cursed, but because they had taken their blessings for granted. The peace, the grace, the comfort they once enjoyed. It wasn't luck, it was a gift. And now, they are learning through silence and struggle what life is like without the grace they mocked while they had it. Fifth, they thought you were an easy target. They didn't realize you were a mirror of their darkness. They thought dealing with you would be easy. They thought you were naive, soft, or unaware. You didn't respond. You didn't expose them. You didn't stoop to their level. So, in their eyes, you were an easy prey. But what they couldn't see was that your silence wasn't weakness. It was a revelation. Because all the time they were attacking you, they were actually reacting to themselves. The problem wasn't you. You were the mirror. Your presence reflected something they didn't want to face. That quiet confidence, that purity, that inner peace, that spiritual clarity. All of these things brought their own chaos to the surface. And instead of healing their wounds, they started projecting them onto you. That's why the gossip started. That's why the fake competition started. That's why they turned every little thing into a power game. Actually, you didn't do anything to them. You simply existed in a way that revealed how far they had strayed from their own uniqueness. Their insecurities couldn't hide from you. Their pride couldn't stand next to your humility. When your truth came out, their lies were exposed. And that's why they tried to break you. Because your light made their darkness too bright to ignore. Your healing exposed their dysfunction. Your peace made their chaos unbearable. You never competed with them, but they turned it into a competition because deep down, they knew they weren't like you. They copied your style, stole your ideas, talked behind your back, and secretly studied you. But nothing they tried worked because you weren't driven by ego. You were aligned with your purpose, and purpose cannot be imitated. They weren't ready for what your energy would bring. They wanted the spotlight, but they couldn't handle the reflection. You weren't a target because you were weak. You became a target because your existence exposed their masks. Every time they looked at you, they saw the versions of themselves they had buried. That's why they attacked you. Not because you threatened their success, but because you exposed their spiritual failure. And now they're left alone with their own reflections. There's no one left to blame. Sixth, you were their test, and they failed miserably. You didn't enter their lives with noise or demands. You came with good intentions, open energy, and a pure heart. You weren't there to influence or control. You were sent as a blessing. And whether they realized it or not, the moment their paths crossed yours, they began to be judged. Not the kind of judgment they could see with their eyes, but a divine test disguised as everyday life. How would they treat someone who carried God's light without a spotlight? They failed magnificently, not because they didn't know, but because they thought it didn't matter. They perceived your kindness as low status, your humility as weakness, your silence as worthlessness. They didn't realize that you were the kind of person people pray to meet, but rarely value once they do. You asked nothing of them but honesty, respect, and sincerity. Instead, they offered you manipulation, mockery, and power games. This was never about religion. It was about character, about honesty, about how people behave when they think no one is watching, unaware that heaven records everything. It was about how they used your name in rooms where you weren't present. It was about how they smiled to your face while making plans behind your back, how they used your love, your loyalty, your very existence, and then discarded it all like it was used. What they didn't realize was that you were the assignment they were graded on, not because you needed to be tested, but because they did. You were sent into their lives as an opportunity to change them, to bless them, to bring harmony. But instead of accepting you, they tried to destroy you. Now this failure is showing up everywhere, because God is not angry, He is just. You cannot misuse a divine mission and expect blessings to keep flowing. Their failure was not just personal, it was spiritual. That is why there is tension in their relationships. Their minds are restless. Their energy is off. Everything is connected to the moment they failed the test and didn't even realize that the test was you. They didn't just lose access to a person. They lost the chance to grow through love. This is a failure that will haunt them in a way no punishment ever could. Seventh, they mocked the process but can't replicate the result. They thought it was a joke. All that isolation, spiritual discipline, the silent nights of being broken and rebuilt. They saw your absence as weakness. While you were actually entering the process of alignment, in their eyes you were falling. While you were praying to God, they were laughing with their little spectators, certain that you had lost everything. What they didn't realize was that you were in a process. And God's process looks like pain before it looks like strength. They mocked it. They mocked your silence, the changes in your lifestyle, your boundaries, your spiritual hunger. They mocked it because they didn't understand. But now they want what you have. They are trying to imitate the result without understanding your light, your peace, your clarity, your grace, your attention, your open doors, and the price you paid. But here's what they learned the hard way. You can't imitate the fruit. You didn't get here by skipping steps. You fought your own demons. You forgave those who didn't apologize. You stayed committed when you had every reason to give up. You made sacrifices when no one was watching. This kind of transformation doesn't come from motivational quotes or image building. It comes from killing your ego every day. Now they're trying to do what you've done. They copy your actions, imitate your style, mimic your messages, but none of it works. Because blessing is not something you can put on like a garment. It is something that has passed you through fire. And the fire they run from is the same fire that makes you untouchable. They want your results, but they don't want your wild side. They want your wisdom, but they don't want your wounds. They want your brightness, but they don't want your shadows. That's why they do things that seem spiritual in the hope of attracting the divine, but nothing changes. There's no power, no oil, no fruit. Because heaven doesn't respond to performance. It responds to the process. The truth is, they're laughing too soon. They didn't realize that the process they're mocking is the same thing God is using to define you. And now, as they try to skip over the things that kept you alive, they're stuck. Because blessing can't be borrowed, copied, or bought. It must be earned in the pit. Eighth, your growth didn't make them small. It exposed their stagnation. You didn't set out to make anyone look small. You just grew quietly, deliberately, sincerely. You took your pain and turned it into wisdom. You took their failures and turned them into structure. You didn't announce every move you made or beg for approval. You just kept going. And now, without saying a word, your progress speaks volumes. What bothers them is not that you are better. What bothers them is that when they tried to hold you back, they were stuck right where they are. They are still repeating the same cycles, still in the same chaos, still relying on the same tricks to survive. And now, your transformation creates a contrast that can no longer be ignored. You did the work, the inner work, the spiritual work, the healing work. You faced what they avoided. While they were busy trying to maintain their appearance to prevent you from becoming like them, you let go of the things they clung to. And now, because you have grown, your growth unintentionally reveals how little progress they have made. This is the part they can't stand. Because seeing someone win is one thing, but realizing that you've won in the very environment they use as an excuse to stay stuck is something else entirely. Your success, no matter how quiet, now exposes every excuse they tell themselves, every delay they justify, every habit they refuse to break. You have become a living reminder of what they could do but choose not to. This is not arrogance. You are not bragging. You are simply living in harmony. And this harmony is very loud to those who choose comfort over the call. To them, your rise feels like an insult. Not because you disrespected them, but because your existence reminds them that they have not grown since they first met you. You did not shame them. Life did. Life revealed that while you were moving forward, they chose to settle for less. And now even your silence is loud. Your peace is unsettling. Not because you tried to be better than them, but because you became what they were afraid of becoming. And the hardest thing for them is to accept that you were never in a race. You just kept walking. And now they resent the distance they created by standing still. Ninth, divine time is not just judgment. It is mercy before wrath. Divine time is not just punishment. It is restraint. It is God saying, before I bring down the full weight of justice, I will give you a chance to look in the mirror. When people mistreat someone God has sent, when they lie, manipulate, betray, or mock someone with a divine purpose, there is almost always a period of silence that follows. This is not the silence of the person they have hurt, but the silence of God. And this silence is not peace. It is mercy in borrowed time. They are spiritually isolated, but they are not aware of it. They just think they are going through a difficult period. They just think they are tired. They think people are behaving differently. They think opportunities are just delayed. What they don't realize is that heaven has paused them. Their names aren't moving forward. They feel like their prayers are blocked. Their peace is gone because God didn't pull the plug to destroy them, but to wake them up. This was the moment they needed to repent, reflect, confront their actions, and realize that what they did wasn't just wrong, it was wrong. This was contrary to heaven's will. But instead of looking inward, they turned to more delusion, more ego, more deviation, and more lies to cover up their final lies. They convinced themselves that the problem was with you, that they were right, that they deserved it. And now they are building an identity on top of what they should be repenting for. This is where mercy begins to turn against them, because divine mercy is not infinite. In such moments, mercy has its hour. It has its window. And when that window closes, judgment begins. Not because God is cruel, but because he is just. Mercy is shown to those who are willing to wake up. However, when someone refuses to take responsibility, mercy becomes a witness against them. They do not realize how close they are to change. They still think they have time. But as they refuse to acknowledge what they have done, the consequences will grow heavier. Divine time is not merely a pause. It is a warning. And when the final bell rings, there will be no more explanations or bargains. Only the reality of what they have sown remains. In the end, you return home. Number 10. They thought you were alone. But you were surrounded by a cloud of the unseen. They thought you had no one. They thought you were vulnerable because you walked alone, isolated, or disconnected from the crowd. They saw your loneliness as a target. It was easy to attack you, to slander you, to betray you. But what they completely overlooked was that your loneliness was sacred, not empty. This was never abandonment. It was a positioning. While they counted their physical allies, you were surrounded by powers they couldn't see. You were never outnumbered. You had the support of something far greater than popularity. Divine intelligence was with you. Not human advice, social circles, or fake supporters, but guidance from the spiritual realm that whispered strategy and judgment when the world was too loud. That was what kept you standing when they tried to shake you. That was what kept your mind sharp when they plotted behind your back. You always had the support of angels. True protection, a spiritual power that prevented attacks before you even noticed they were launched. This is why their plans failed. This is why their rumors didn't hold up. This is why you emerged unscathed while they waited for you to fall. This wasn't luck. It was divine protection. They couldn't touch what was protected. And on top of all that, you had the support of your ancestors. Those who came before you, who prayed for you before you were even born. Noble warriors who survived hell and passed the flag on to you. You walked with instructions encoded in your DNA. Prayers spoken decades ago carried you forward. That's why, no matter how hard they tried, you didn't break. You were already walking with a spiritual momentum that guaranteed your victory. While they laughed at your loneliness, heaven applauded your discipline. While they judged your silence, God exalted your name in rooms they could never enter. They thought you had no support, but you had an invisible strategy. You didn't need to fight loudly. You just needed to stand firm. They thought you were an easy target. But the truth is, you were never alone. You were hidden within divine protection, walking in the clouds of an invisible power they could never understand or reach. That's why you're still standing, and they're still confused. Number 11. Their world is crumbling because it was built on ego, not harmony. They built everything not for a purpose, not for truth, but only for applause. Their goal was not to be in harmony, but to be seen. And for a while, it worked. They got attention. They got praise. They seemed to be winning. But underneath it all, nothing was based on truth. They were egos wearing crowns. They stepped on people to get ahead. They used manipulation instead of skill, and lies instead of learning. They saw people as tools, not as souls. They didn't build relationships, they built networks. And they used everyone who trusted them, time and time again. They thought this was power, but it was just the flow of time. They copied the light they didn't possess. They imitated the sanctity they never deserved. They took credit for the praise of things created through others' suffering. They stole their existence without having a core. But the divine order cannot be deceived. Nothing built on lies can stand forever. The kingdom they created looked impressive. Big platforms, loud voices, grand halls. But there was no peace, no inner stability, no real foundation, and now it is all collapsing. Things are getting stressful. Relationships are cracking. Those who once praised them are now backing away. Doors that were once wide open are now closed. This is not sabotage. It is not coincidence. This is divine collapse. This is what happens when ego takes the wheel. God allows this for a time to test intentions. But when ego becomes the foundation, it corrupts everything it touches. The fall is never random. It is always connected to choices made in secret. Their world is not collapsing because someone hates them. It is collapsing because it was never built on honesty. It was built on fantasy. And the weight of fantasies can only hold for so long. That is the difference between you and them. You surrendered. They put on a performance. You adapted. They revealed themselves. You allowed God to elevate you. They tried to force their rise. Now the storm is doing what it always does. It is revealing the truth. And right now, every false brick is crumbling. Not because you wished for their downfall, but because God will never allow ego to win the battle against harmony. Number 12. You are successful in public, but you are bleeding in your private life. They now see your brilliance, your radiance, your confidence, your drive. They are watching you win. To some, it seems like an overnight thing, as if you suddenly appeared, as if success found you in a single night. But what they don't know is that this state of yours was built in silence, in your private life, in nights that nearly shattered your soul. You were bleeding when no one was watching, smiling in public while falling apart in private. You had to muster the courage to keep going when no one was there. You had to pray in fear, cry in confusion, and heal while wounded. There were nights when you couldn't sleep, not because of excitement, but because of the weight of betrayals that shattered your trust and rejections that pierced your heart. There were moments when you felt like God had abandoned you. And while you were going through all of this, they were playing games, gossiping, mocking, and living recklessly. They thought you were wasting your time, that you were too deep, that you took life too seriously. They saw your loneliness as weakness, not realizing it was your construction site. God was building a foundation they could never replicate, not because He chose you over them, but because you surrendered while they ran away. You didn't skip steps. You didn't look for shortcuts. You stayed in the fire until the job was done. You let the process break you, refine you, purify you. And now when people look at you, they only see the result, your smile, your confidence, your privilege. What they don't see is the journey, the cost, the pain, the humiliation. That's why victory feels different. It has weight. It has scars. It carries the quiet power of someone who has conquered themselves. You didn't fake it. You didn't act your way here. You didn't buy it. You became it. And the truth is, it's not just about material success or status. It's about what you had to become to get here. And that's why no one can take it away from you. They can't compete with it. It's impossible to steal because they didn't suffer for it. And that's what makes your rise untouchable. Number 13. Their souls recognize your position. Even if their egos refuse to admit it, there's a reason they feel uneasy when your name is mentioned. There's a reason their smiles fade when they see you succeed. It's not just jealousy. It's not simple jealousy. It's something deeper than that. Their souls are aware of something their egos are still trying to deny. Your spiritual position. Long before titles, platforms, or public success, your existence carried a weight they could feel but never explain. You were marked, set apart, covered, and they knew it. Even when they laughed at you, something inside them knew it wasn't wise. Even when they gossiped, they felt a heaviness in their chests. Because their souls had awakened. Their souls knew you weren't an ordinary person. They were facing someone who walked with a divine authority, not driven by ambition, but by harmony. They should have honored you. They should have protected you, exalted you, supported you. But instead, they chose sabotage. And now, every time you win, they feel not only pain, but also guilt. Unspoken, unresolved spiritual guilt. Because deep down, their consciences know they have betrayed someone they should never have competed against. They disrespected someone sent to bless them. Shame lies within them, but it reflects in their actions. That tense laughter, that strange silence, that overly compensatory smile. This is not just discomfort. This is belief. And this feeling is permanent because the ego can lie, but the soul never forgets. Their egos tell them you're better, but their souls whisper, you were wrong. And that whisper never stops. That's why your success bothers them. Not because you're bragging, not because you're rubbing it in their faces, but because your rise reminds them that they failed at a divine mission. It reminds them how they treated someone who showed them nothing but love. It reminds them that even when they think no one is watching, God is watching them. Now they have to live with that knowledge. They may never say it out loud. They may never apologize. But the tension in their souls speaks volumes. They can ignore your existence. They can block you. They can act like they've forgotten you. But they can't erase what their souls have already accepted. Your position was real, and they misjudged it. Number 14. You're not flying high with joy. You're glowing. You're not here to prove anything. You're not sharing to get a reaction. You're not walking with pride or pain. You're just being yourself. And this is shaking them up. Because they were expecting a revenge story. They were expecting petty behavior. They were expecting you to rub your success in their faces, to rub your achievements in their wounds. But instead, what they got was grace. And this grace speaks louder than any mocking words ever could. You're not gloating with joy. You're shining. And this shine isn't just external. It's spiritual. Emotional. It's rooted in peace. A deep peace that comes from not trying to be understood by people who didn't understand you at first. This shine comes from choosing healing over chaos, silence over gossip, and destiny over drama. They don't understand how you've been successful without saying it out loud. They don't understand that you chose not to speak when you had so much to say. They don't understand that you chose to elevate them instead of exposing them. And your choice to keep rising instead of retaliating breaks their pride in a way they never expected. Because your life proves something their egos can't handle. You didn't need revenge to win. They were waiting for you to fall. They wanted to see you suffer. They hoped your brilliance was fake, so they could tear it apart. But all they see now is authenticity, purity, strength, and peace. All wrapped in humility. You're not trying to show them. You're showing it to yourself, to your higher self, to your divine self. The version that has always been there, buried under pain and self-doubt. And the people who tried to keep you small are now watching you rise, silently, without malice, without even mentioning your name. And that silence is deafening because you're doing everything they said you could never do, without them even having to see it. Your energy has changed. Your focus has changed. You are not seeking revenge. You are seeking harmony. While they struggle with pride and regret, you simply continue to shine. Because shining is a natural byproduct of choosing healing over hatred. They thought your silence meant defeat. They thought your loneliness meant weakness and that you would never shine. But what they couldn't see was that you never acted to draw attention to yourself. You acted for harmony. Every tear you silently swallowed, every sleepless night, every betrayal was part of a divine plan. Not just to elevate you, but to expose them. Not to publicly shame them, but to give them a private chance to repent. As they watch your life overflow, they see their own lives falling into chaos. This is no coincidence. This is the result of divine separation. You weren't seeking revenge. You didn't need it. God allowed time to speak. And now, at every new level you reach, their consciences become the loudest voice in the room. Your journey was not to prove to people that they were wrong. It was to prove God was right. You were a test they were unaware of. The light they didn't know they needed. The mirror they tried to break, but couldn't. You now walk with a purpose. Without pain, without pride, simply blessed, without noise, without show, simply undeniable. Not seeking revenge, but in a state of complete renewal. And as their world begins to crumble under the weight of ego and illusion, yours is being built brick by brick with peace, strength, and divine authority. You didn't come here by chance. You were shaped, refined, chosen. And the strongest part of you is that you don't need to boast. All you had to do was shine. Take this as a reminder. The tables haven't just turned. God has built you a brand new room. If this message resonated with you, don't just scroll past. Return to what nourishes you. Subscribe and become part of a community that sees the unseen, speaks the truth, and walks in divine alignment.